Hello, and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast, where you can learn powerful techniques to change the way you feel. I am your host, Dr. Rhonda Borowski, and joining me here in the Murrieta studio is Dr. David Burns. Dr. Burns is a pioneer in the development of cognitive behavioral therapy and the creator of the new TEAM Therapy. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 30 languages. His latest book, Feeling Great, contains powerful new techniques that make rapid recovery possible for many people struggling with depression and anxiety. Dr. Burns is currently an emeritus adjunct professor of clinical psychiatry at Stanford University School of Medicine.
Hello, Rhonda.
Hi, David, and welcome to our listeners in the United States, Canada, Mexico, and across the world. This is episode 291. It is a live Ask David episode with our Team UK therapists. Tell us how this got started, David.
Let's see, I'm not sure. I think you got them started. I did a workshop over in England a few years ago, which I thought was a total fiasco. I think that they kind of took umbrage that, I was presenting a new variation of cognitive therapy. I think the Brits had just gotten excited about cognitive therapy, and then I was telling them there's something even better now. But apparently, a few people did like it, including Peter Spurrier and Derek and some others. And the British TEAM CBT group has formed, and they're really neat people. And they asked if I would come to their weekly group. And I said I would love to do that, and they wanted to have a couple of Q&A sessions. And so in this and next week's podcast, I answered 9 really neat questions that they asked, and I hope you enjoy it. Although they're therapists, I think the general public, all of our podcast fans, might find some of these questions interesting. And what are some of the really neat questions here in episode 1 that they're about to hear?
Well, Greg asked about the surprising results from the Feeling Good beta test. And then Rima asked if psychotherapy homework is required. Paul asked about treating PTSD for people who have intrusive thoughts. Jessica asked a question about treating adolescents with TEAM CBT. And Peter asked about positive reframing and how much is enough.
Detail, yeah. Those are neat questions. Like the first one, I was just saying when we did the beta tests, the written comments on what they liked and disliked were as informative as in therapy when you get feedback, empathy feedback from your patients, and they write out what turned them off and what turned them on, and it's often unexpected. And they want to hear about some of that. So that's really neat. And all of the questions I thought were exciting. And then next week, I'm going out on a limb a little bit of marketing. And one of the questions will be Burns versus Van de Kolk.
Yeah,
however you pronounce his name.
That's an interesting question.
And I didn't set it up that way, but they read some statements from his, The Body Knows the Scorebook, which is very popular, and he's very popular, and asked me if I agreed with his statements. And so next week you can hear that as well. But I want to thank the British for their graciousness, and I think the British approach is terrific. They're not as dominated by drug companies and money in England. I think it's more of a compassionate-based system because their health system is part of the, free for everyone.
Yeah.
And I just think I just love them, and I hope you really enjoy this podcast.
Yeah, and just to clarify, it's not just the British that are on this podcast. It's also there's someone from Scotland, someone from Ireland. So it's spread out throughout the United Kingdom.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
Yeah.
And do you have a wonderful endorsement to read?
I do have a wonderful endorsement to read.
Okay. I said that as a joke because I thought you might not.
I always do. This is from
cool.
Mike. And Mike wrote, "Hi, Dr. Burns. I just wanted to email to let you know that I've almost finished your book, Feeling Great. And wow, what an eye-opener it's been. It's a breath of fresh air to see logical conclusions being made about emotions and the direct step-by-step methods you use to dispel negative ones. I already feel much more at peace with myself and less anxious to reach out to friends and ask what they think of me. I'm feeling much more hopeful about the future and will continue using these techniques to assist with my mood management. I wanted to email you because I felt like reaching out before, but I never have due to my own anxiety that comes along with it. But now I've reached out. So I hope you're having a great day. Sincerely, Mike.
Oh, thank you, Mike. And that just warms my heart. Absolutely. And that's one of the best endorsements I've ever heard, because when I'm writing a book like Feeling Great or my first book, Feeling Good, or any of them, I'm hoping that people who read them will take the technique seriously and use them to good effect in their personal lives. And when I get an email like that one, it just blows my mind and makes me so happy. And now I've been working as hard on the Feeling Good app as I had on any of my books. And I'm hoping that that is also going to be a tool that's going to change the lives of so many people, not only in the United States, but around the world. And if you want to sign up to be a beta tester, just go to feelinggood.com. That's my website, /app, and you can sign up there. And also, I keep forgetting to promote my upcoming workshop with Jill Levitt, the David and Jill Live workshop. What's the date of this podcast going to be?
The date of 291 will be May 9th.
Okay, yeah. So there's time for you to attend our cool workshop, where we're going to be treating two people live. And do you know the date of that? Or
I don't.
Oh gosh, I've got it here on my computer. Let me see if I can locate it. Just give me a half a second here. Oh yeah, I know where I can find it. But let me say the reason I'm excited about it. There's two. First of all, I think that the live work is always the most dramatic and the most helpful of all of the that we do. It's the best teaching of all, because and Jill and I are going to show you the secrets of rapid recovery, whether you're a therapist or a general public person. I think you're going to love this workshop. Our last live workshop, where we did live work with 2 volunteers, was one of our highest rated ever. And that's why this one is backed by popular demand. And then the second thing is, I finally convinced Maor Katz, the wonderful director of the Feeling Good Institute, and my beloved colleague, Dr. Jill Levitt, to let the general public attend this one. And so if you've been dying to go to a workshop, this is your chance. Now, let me see if I can get the exact date.
Okay, it's May 22, May 22nd.
Great.
From 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time.
Great. That'll be a Sunday. And then what's the link for that? And I'll put the link in the show notes too.
I'll send you the link.
Okay, we can't announce it, so
the link. How do?
What is the link?
Oh,
will you go to the Feeling Good Institute / something?
Well, it's therapist training.
Oh yeah.
-feeling good.
Therapist training. I would just say go to the Feeling Good Institute website, feelinggoodinstitute.com, and then go to therapist training. But you can even go to this one if you're not a therapist. Go to therapist training, and then you can find the upcoming, it's called David Burns Live. It should be called David and Jill Live, because we'll be doing co-therapy. But it's the David Burns Live, and that'll be on a Sunday, and we have a blast when we do these workshops. So if you're at all interested, you can come, and we might be able to make our next workshop in the fall on social anxiety welcome to the general public as well. So if you're struggling with public speaking anxiety, social anxiety, small bladder syndrome, not small bladder, shy bladder syndrome, test anxiety, any form of social anxiety, you're going to love that workshop.
And one of the things that it says on I'm at the website that talks about it, is that following the demonstration of the live work, people who attend this workshop are going to be broken up into small groups so that they can practice the key techniques that you and Jill demonstrated.
Right, exactly.
Which is pretty cool.
Exactly. And we'll have groups for the general public with leaders supervising, and groups for the therapists, because sometimes the therapists like their training to be separate from the general public. But whether you're a therapist or the general public, you'll see cool stuff, hopefully, and you'll get a chance to learn and practice some techniques that can really dramatically change your practice.
Okay, well, now let's take a listen to the live Q&A with the UK team therapists.
The first question is Greg, and a question about the app.
Okay, what is the question about the app? Because I have a lot to say about the app.
Hi, David. I'm a bit nervous, talking to the great man, I must admit. So I just want to thank you, first of all, for all your amazing work.
Thanks, Greg.
In the app, in 2 podcasts, you talked about some things, and by the way, the whole thing is very exciting, but you did talk about some things that you were surprised did not work. You've referred to that a couple of times, and I was, on tenterhooks, what are these things? And I'm wondering, do we need to know this? Do we need to know this if we practice TEAM?
Well, we will be learning a lot of basic science that will be helpful to all therapists in terms of what works and what doesn't work, in terms of what causes people to change. And I can tell you the main findings there if you like. But the neat thing about the app is we get feedback from people in terms of how much did you like the lesson that you just completed. It might have been a 4-minute lesson, for example, and 0 to 100, and what turned you off, what turned you on about it. Plus, we measure their moods every few minutes. So I can see by their comments, by their ratings, things that turn them on and things that turn them off. Just in the same sense as when you use the brief mood survey, you can see how your patient's moods change within a session, and you can also see how they're rating you for empathy and helpfulness. And it's always eye-opening, because some things that I think are going to be great, they get ticked off and slam me for, and then some things that I think, well, that's not very exciting. They love it, or they it really changes a shift in the mood of the people using the app. One of the things I thought that hopelessness is such an important dimension, and so I thought that people would like reports and seeing patients who, including a video or a description of patients who recovered in a single session or just a few sessions after decades of failed therapy, and to show them the technique that worked for that patient. But I found that a lot of times these things irritated them because they didn't believe that rapid recovery was possible. So, or they're so used to thinking and being told that effective therapy has to take years. I did a talk for the Psychoanalytic Association in San Francisco, and I was the token cognitive therapist at the time. And it was a psychoanalytic, a half-day symposium. And so most of the speakers were psychoanalysts. And so I just mentioned, and this was a number of years ago, that my group was working on rapid recovery and measuring things to prove that the recovery was happening. And I thought that I would get slammed, but surprisingly, they were, I had about an hour talk, I guess, and they were very warm and receptive. But when it came to the panel discussion at the end, a very famous psychoanalytic woman, the head of some prestigious institute in San Francisco, whispered in my ear that most if not all of her patients had been with her for 10 years already, and that a few of them were just beginning to make tiny steps forward. And she was saying that as a put down because she thought it was outrageous that people could respond in a matter of a few sessions or even in a single 2-hour therapy session. And I find that a lot of the patients have that same mindset, that they're afraid to believe that rapid recovery is possible. And so then I re-record those sections and add much more humility and talking about therapeutic failures and people who that it's hard to recover and it takes a lot of work. And then they like those kind of statements. But in general, the experience with the app, it's just fantastic. And we just completed another beta test. I'll get the results later this morning and begin to analyze them statistically. But it's just finding out over and over again that my thinking is usually wrong or often wrong. And that if you're humble, it's just a fantastic way to gain power and strength and understanding. But you have to let your ego die. And then the statistical modeling that I do using structural equation modeling is a very exciting tool that I use, that I've used and spent really thousands of hours learning to use that tool over the years. And the statistical modeling is very similar. I'll put my thinking, draw it as a pictorial model, but the picture you draw on the computer screen is actually a series of simultaneous linear equations. And then the computer solves them and then tells you where you're at. And usually the computer tells you that your thinking is so screwed up that the model you drew can't possibly be correct, and it would be very foolish to interpret any of the parameters. So it just ruthlessly crushes your ego, and you can be shot down as many as 30 times an hour, by the computer. But it's exciting because it's telling you there's something else going on that you're not seeing. And then when you see that, then suddenly the model becomes beautiful and everything fits like a glove. And then a computer tells you, you've got it, David. That's what I've been trying to tell you. So it's just discovery. And the discovery happens, I'd say 50 times faster with an app than if you're trying to do research with human therapists. And one of the things that has been confirmed is the massive importance of motivation and resistance. And the computer has said this is also true in the app, just like in your human work that you proved in Philadelphia and published in Journal of Consulting and Clinical Psychology in the 1990s. And the app said the same is true here. And one of the variables that I'm measuring with the most massive impact on changes in depression is motivation and resistance. The simple thing is how many of the required exercises did they do? How many of the required mood ratings did they fill out? How many did they skip? That type of thing. And that variable is just huge, massive causal effects, not only changes in depression, but all 7 negative emotions that we measured and happiness as well. But secret after secret like that, the computer is spitting out. And I think that the app will transform behavioral sciences research and will transform behavioral treatment of depression and anxiety and other disorders. That's the quick response, but that was awfully long-winded.
David, thank you so much. And on the subject of happiness, recently I know that I and a couple of other people on here had drops to zero on depression, anxiety, and anger and so on, but the happiness remained the same. Could you and I think you also talked about the disconnect between the happiness and the absence of depression. I'm just wondering, what is the cause of happiness? What can we do to increase that happiness score?
Yeah, well, the app has also confirmed something that I predicted in the 1990s in an article in the Journal of Consulting and Clinical Psychology. At the time, people were arguing about why our measures of depression and anxiety always correlated. like 0.6 or something, which is a modest correlation, but very significant. And so I modeled that using structural equation modeling and found the most likely interpretation wasn't that depression causes anxiety or that anxiety causes depression. The computer model says this does not happen, but that they're linked by an unknown common cause. And so I tested that with 140 people in our last beta test and confirmed that that is true, but that common cause also has causal effects on all 7 negative emotions and accounts for most of their variance. So the variance, I know in economics, you can get a Nobel Prize if you can get a 3% R squared, like account for 3% of the variance. Well, this common causes accounts for like 60 to 90% of the variance in all of these negative emotions. It accounts for almost all of the variance in depression, anger, anxiety, inadequacy, hopelessness, loneliness. And they all go up dramatically when people use the app, and they go up and down together because of this common cause. And the app says that all of your causal effects work through this common cause. The common cause also has causal effects on happiness, the one positive emotion that we measure, but only accounts for about 30% of the variance in happiness. So 2/3 or more of the causes of happiness are not included in our model. Now, the computer also told me that the thing that's affecting this common cause is what Epictetus told us 2,000 years ago. It's the patient's belief in the distorted thoughts. And as that goes down, the common cause goes down. And all of the app works through changes in negative thinking and then through this common cause. Now, I don't know what the common cause is, and I'm not even sure at the moment how to figure out what it is. But it's very similar. Distorted negative thinking has massive causal effects on it. It accounts for 70% of it, 60 to 70% of the variance in this common cause. I don't know what it is, but it's whatever it is, it has effects on all kinds of negative feelings simultaneously. And then there's some other maybe positive thinking, which we're not measuring, would perhaps be affecting happiness. The causes of happiness are largely 2/3 are totally independent from the causes of depression and negative feelings and unhappiness. Depression and happiness are not the opposite ends of the same spectrum. They're independent to a significant extent. I don't know if that answers your question.
Thank you, David. It does. I think someone else is going to ask how to increase the happiness.
Well, one thing you can do to decrease the happiness, or to increase the happiness, is to decrease the depression, because definitely this common cause does have effects on decreasing happiness. And in the app, the happiness went up a lot, actually, because of the app. And in the I think the 70 or 80 patients who were the most severely depressed, the happiness actually went up 80% in one day. So whatever we're doing in the app is causing massive changes, sudden changes in happiness. But a lot of those changes aren't just through changes in negative thinking, because that only accounted for maybe 35% of the variance in happiness. These are all great questions. I don't know the answers to most of them yet, but the answers will evolve. And if anybody starts working with us, conceptualizing, interacting with us as we get results of the beta, we may be able to design ways to answer more and more of these questions as we do more beta tests and get more and more people using the app.
Thank you very much, David.
To me, the basic research is just as exciting as the amazing clinical results that we've seen so far, and hopefully we'll continue to see.
Thank you, David.
Yep.
Thank you, David. That's a tremendously exciting subject. It sounds like we're at the beginning of a new exciting phase of understanding the cause of human suffering and how to alleviate it. And so on that note, I'm going to pass you on to our second question, and that's from Rima, and I think that's a question about rapid recovery.
Hi, David. Hi.
Hi.
Sorry, I might have a panic attack in between, so if I speak like out of breath, excuse me. I'll try and speak a bit slowly so you can understand what I'm saying. Okay, you've compared like team therapy to playing an instrument. So all the components of practicing in between, of doing the homework, of coming to sessions, of testing before and after for the importance of the alliance. And so, you know, because you've kind of had these negative ways of thinking your entire life. So to rewire your brain and to relearn them, this takes all of this. So I'm wondering how you align that with the 2-hour sessions that you do, which a lot of time doesn't have the homework. It doesn't have the, you know, the after session, the ETS, all these aspects of it. So I'm just wondering how kind of you can align that with the 2-hour sessions that you have, which you say bring complete recovery.
Yeah, well, that confused me for a long time, too. The first time I heard that question, I thought, oh, my gosh, that's a good question. I should have thought of that a long time ago. And because this rapid recovery really is pretty new. And, you know, I didn't see it when I was in Philadelphia in my clinical practice using the more old-fashioned type of cognitive therapy. People got better, but it was after 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15 sessions, you know, type of thing. And so the homework was very important. And the app's telling us that it's even within the app, it's the most important thing about how it works. And you know, after people recovery, I always do relapse prevention training, and I'm just working on that module in the app right now, coincidentally, and we're hoping to complete that and record it and have it in the next beta test that starts in 2 weeks. And the idea there is that once people recover, they go from the nothing of all or nothing thinking to the all. And they think, oh, gosh, I'm not worthless after all. I feel happy. This is fantastic. And they get the idea, I'm going to be happy forever. I can see so clearly that my negative thoughts were rubbish. And this seems so easy, and I feel so at peace, so close to other people, so open, so vulnerable, so joyous. And that's the all of all or nothing thinking. And they've got to know at that point that you are going to relapse. The probability of that is 100%. It's not 50% or 70%. It's an ultimate certainty. It's impossible for humans to be happy all the time. And so you have to prepare for that relapse. And that means whenever you get these negative thoughts, you sit down, you do your daily mood log. Staying in shape emotionally is the same as staying in shape physically. I get out and I do my slogging 2 miles a day. I'm super fast. Yesterday, I sped up a lot, which encouraged me. And then an elderly woman with white hair zoomed right past me. So it's not a very pleasant experience for me. I never have a runner's high. All I've ever had is a runner's super low. But I push myself to do it because I want to stay alive. I want to keep my heart beating and all of that type of thing. And it's the same. If you want to stay in a happy state, you've got to keep practicing with the tools that cause you to recover the first time. And for everyone, it'll be a little different. But the tools that helped you the first time, whether that was a paradoxical cost-benefit analysis or the acceptance paradox or the externalization of voices or, you know, the hidden emotion technique, whatever the method was, that method will probably always help you. But you've got to be willing to use that technique every time you get upset. And that means staying in practice and also preparing for the thoughts you're going to have when the relapse comes. Thoughts like, oh, this proved the app didn't work, or this proves the therapy didn't work. I'm so depressed today. I must be hopeless after all. The treatment was worthless. My improvement was a fluke. People have to also be prepared to smash those thoughts and to do it ahead of time when they're feeling great rather than waiting for the relapse and then trying to struggle with those very horribly distorted but devastating kinds of negative thoughts. So I think that's a little why I've always been against meditation. And a lot of people love it, and I say, God bless you, you go for it. But I would like to see people working with negative thoughts every day rather than meditating. If you don't have much time, if you've got 10 minutes, I'd like to see people practicing writing down your negative thoughts, identifying the distortions in them, and keeping at it. Not a massive amount of time, because life is too short to spend all of our time on countering negative thoughts. But I think it's an active process, because we're rewiring the brain, as Professor Mark Noble has pointed out on so many of our podcasts. And that rewiring process has to continue on an ongoing basis. I use the techniques all the time myself. I get upset all the time. I get slammed by people and ripped to shreds by people, and things come up that are disturbing. And then I have to do the same thing, to look at my own thoughts and talk back to them. It's an active process, and I'm so grateful that I have it available. To me, life is good. But if you just slide and you don't keep at it, then you may be vulnerable to succumbing to these upsets that turn into prolonged relapses, rather than popping back out of that relapse quickly. I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. A little. So more or less, you do kind of give them homework, even if it's just a 2-hour session that you see them and it's over. You still kind of tell them that this is what you do. You should be keeping up with it. You should be
It was my privilege to work with one of Britain's most accomplished human beings on Sunday morning, live, Sterling Morey, who was my first student. One of my first cognitive therapy students, and we had a chance to do co-therapy for the first time since 1980. And it was magic again. And we worked with a woman in Africa with severe social anxiety that's really incapacitated her. And as we used to do when we worked together, the patient really hit the ball out of the park and had more than a complete recovery. She went into a state of euphoria, really, I would say. But Sterling very cleverly gave her a homework assignment that when she goes to Rhonda's Wednesday group, she has to announce her social anxiety, something she's always hidden. She has to ask people if they judge her because she has social anxiety. We gave her homework assignments, and I also gave her the assignment to listen to the audio that we made, the recording of the session, and that to write her thoughts down to complete the paper version of the daily mood log, because we did it all with role playing and stuff like that. It was the session, although it took 2 hours, it moved super high speed, and that type of thing. It has to be. It's not just be one shot and then you're cured for good. The Buddha said all human beings drift in and out of enlightenment and will do so forever. And when I first heard that, I didn't know what it meant. And then a couple days later, I said, oh, that's right. He was talking about relapse. We all drift out of enlightenment, and we get to feeling irritable again and self-doubting and anxious and angry and frustrated and kind of worthless. And then you have to use the tools again and get back into enlightenment. And it's not only psychological learning. To me, it's spiritual learning at the same time, because the ideas that are associated with recovery, at least in TEAM CBT, are more than psychological techniques. They're really spiritual concepts, like the death of the self. And it's understanding things on that deeper level, and that's part of, I think, what makes it fun. It's nourishing. It's just not a few gimmicks or formulas or psychological techniques. It's a transformation in the patients and our own vision of what is the, you see suddenly the answer to question, like what is the meaning of life? What is this being reborn all about? what is that experience? How can we facilitate it? And then how do we keep nourishing our psychological and spiritual growth after this initial breakthrough happens?
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you, David. A wonderful answer. The next question is from Paul. He's got a question dealing with intrusive thoughts and trauma.
Well, those are two topics. One is intrusive thoughts and one is trauma. We had a podcast Monday with Tyann Trong from Oklahoma City, who's a prominent and lovely team therapist and teacher, on the O of OCD and intrusive thoughts. And maybe I'll refer you to that Monday podcast, which, or maybe it was a week ago Monday. That was a week ago Monday, but you can find it on my website, feelinggood.com, and there's a list of all of the podcasts, and it was the one from a week from Monday. Today, right now, is the 22nd of March, so that one probably would have been the 14th of March.
Yeah, that's already out. Listen, I've listened to that one. That's a fantastic podcast, David. I found that really
love Tyann. Now, but the other question I'll address right now, if someone reminds me in my mental state what it was.
Yeah, I'm just checking. Is Paul here? I'm not sure if it... Oh, do you want to ask you? Go ahead, answer your question, please.
So to echo what was said before, thank you for your work, David. It's incredible, and your ability to translate a Scottish accent is also pretty incredible.
Trauma was the other thing.
Yeah, so my question was, how can, one of the bits that I struggle with, I deal with a couple of clients that have difficulty coping with intrusive thoughts that are pictures and related to past traumas. I was wondering, how do you see TEAM being able to help that? And also, could the techniques used in EMDR be used in the methods stage of TEAM? I've thought about implementing that at the methods stage, and how effective you think that would be.
Sure. Well, I did a 2-day trauma workshop a few years back, and I probably presented it in 20 or 30 times or more in the United States and Canada. And I simply use TEAM, TEAM, exactly as I would with any other patient when I'm working with trauma patients. The only difference is, and here I think I probably have, for whatever reason, a radically different experience of other trauma experts. I've always found the trauma patients, even before TEAM, for me, have been by far the easiest patients to treat, and generally responded in a single, even a 1-hour session before I had TEAM, and the 2-hour sessions that I always use now. And no, I've never needed or used or been attracted to EMDR, but you can use anything you want in the M part of TEAM. But the patients I treated were patients with, massive traumas, like you can hear the one with Marilyn Coffey that I treated live on a podcast. And I just saw her Saturday, by the way, like 3 or 4 years ago. She went to the doctor and said, "You have stage 4 lung cancer." And she freaked out, as we all would, because she'd never smoked. And I mean, she was just overwhelmingly depressed, angry, anxious, felt worthless. And again, she had all of her emotions were at 100, all in 8 or 9 different categories. Inpatients in hospitals are almost never that severe, and everything went to 0 in that session. And that was an acute trauma because her thoughts were very distorted. But it was, first of all, we did the testing, and then we empathized with her. I worked with Matt May, one of my former students, and now just a tremendous clinician here in the community doing TEAM CBT. And then we did the assessment of resistance because she was all beating up on herself because she'd lost her faith in God. She's a very religious woman, and she's doubting the existence of the afterlife and telling herself that she was a failure because she'd never found a partner, a loving partner in her life, and things like that. And then I also, during that time, worked with people with what we would call, complex trauma, who have had multiple recurrent traumas starting in childhood and carrying right up to where they are today. But pretty much all of them recovered in one double session using TEAM, and it isn't any different at all. But it's just like I'm focusing on what the patient wants help with, which is how they're feeling right now today, which might be worthless or ashamed or whatever. But the crucial thing is melting away that resistance through the positive reframing, and having the patient see that what they had thought was what was wrong with them, all these negative thoughts and feelings that we've been conditioning patients to think those are mental disorders. These show that there's something wrong with you, to see that there's something right with them. That's the expression of something beautiful about them. And when the patient sees that, if they really see it, there's a kind of an aha experience, and their shame disappears, and they're suddenly proud of their depression and their rage and their hopelessness and their loneliness and their inadequacy and their panic, and then recovery becomes pretty easy. I published informally the results of, I kept records on 40 of those patients that I treated live in public settings with severe trauma, and it's in one of the chapters in the new book, Feeling Great. It's not a scientific report, like it wasn't a controlled outcome study. It was just a naturalistic report of this is what I've experienced. But I've always asked myself, why is it that trauma patients for me have been 100% of the time way easier to treat than anyone else? And I think it's because a lot of times trauma patients, they didn't ask to be, raped or to have a horrific automobile accident or whatever thing it was. And so they're eager to get back to joy again. They're not interested in carrying on a life of depression or bitterness or panic. And so I've always felt maybe that's the reason, whereas if you have patients with chronic depression and diagnosed with personality disorders, including borderline personality disorder, there's someone who has a long-term identity in a negative direction, and they sometimes require more therapeutic skill to treat. But anyway, that's my answer, lame as it may be. And I'll say one more thing. And I've presented a lot of the patients, in podcasts who have presumably long-term problems that require long-term treatment. I had a woman with over 20 years of contamination phobia, and she had the same exact thing that Howard Hughes had. And I treated her in one of my Tuesday groups, and she recovered completely. And in one evening, her actual recovery was just about 3 minutes. And one of my students in the group captured it on video, and then I had her come on a podcast and talk about her experience and what it felt like, and if the results had lasted. And again, I thought people would love this, and most people did, but I did get some hate mail about it. Like one person just wrote in "F you," and there was rage from some minority, but a loud minority, who burns as a horrible, evil monster because he's promoting things that can't possibly be true, or he's trying to trivialize people's suffering. There's a huge suspicion or hostility about the idea that people can rapidly be treated. And it's in the teaching too. As a psychiatric resident, I was told that it takes a lifetime for depression to evolve, and the treatment takes years.
Many thanks, anyway, David. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Bob.
No,
that's good.
Thank you very much.
Oh, yeah, I'll shut up here.
No, thank you very much. I think that, you've answered my question. Thank you very much, David.
Fantastic. Moving on to question number 4. That's from Jessica. And I'll let Jessica introduce the question.
Yeah. Hi, David. It's a real honor to be talking with you. Very excited. And my question is about treating adolescents, whether you need to treat them any differently to adults. It probably links into what you're talking about just now in terms of, I guess, that hostility and maybe a suspicion, possibly that, no adult could possibly understand.
Let me just stop you for a second, because I didn't get the word you said of how to treat something, and so I'm a little lost.
How to treat teenagers, whether you
how to treat teenagers?
Yeah. Whether you treat them any differently, or whether the same techniques work.
It's just the same techniques. I didn't treat a ton of teenagers because I was mainly adult shrinks. I didn't know how legal it was or whatever, but I did treat a fair number, because I would treat an adult and then they'd send their teenage kids to me, and I always loved it because they were so vulnerable. And then I worked, with my own daughter too a little bit when she was a freshman in high school and didn't know how to flirt, and she thought that popularity was a genetic thing, and if you're born unpopular, you're doomed to be unpopular, and so I just really loved working with her too to solve that problem. But I once had a chance to go to test teenagers who had been arrested in California for violent crimes, and the legal people wanted me to give my brief mood survey and let them know about the emotions of these kids, how many are suicidal and how many are violent and, depressed and all of that. And then they asked me to go to the juvenile hall near the Pacific Ocean in San Mateo and talk to some of the girls who had been arrested and the boys who had been arrested. And they were both groups of gang members. And they were arrested for violent crimes, including murder. And I thought the kids would be very hardcore, and the opposite was true. It was just so moving. I practically cried when I was with the girls. They seemed so hungry to have an adult to talk to who would show an interest in them. And then when and they said, now you have to go and talk to these boys, and there were about 6 or 7 boys. And again, I thought they'd be real hardcore, and they were just so hungry to talk and share. But one boy wouldn't open up. He wouldn't say anything. And so after 15 minutes or so, I says, Billy, you're not saying anything, and I'm wondering why that is. And he says, well, if you want to know, I'll tell you why. He says, because this morning, and this was a boy who had just murdered 2 people. And he said, you woke up and you told yourself, I'm going to go and visit with these violent gang members in juvenile hall and talk to them. And you're going to get some new theory about teenage violence. And then you're going to get, you're going to make yourself, rich and famous off of what you learned from us today. And you're not going to give us nothing. You see, Doc, you're just here to exploit us. And that's why the hell I'm not saying nothing. And when he said that, I just felt stung, because that's exactly the fantasy I'd had when I woke up. I'm going to go up here and learn these cool things, and I'll be in Time magazine or something like that. And I had to decide, am I going to use the 5 secrets of effective communication or not? Am I going to be real or not? And what I said to him is, Billy, I'm just feeling so ashamed right now. because I have to agree with you, and the way you're saying it, I hadn't thought of that, but you're right. I woke up, I was all excited. I thought I was going to learn these important things and kind of do an interview and become famous or something like that. And in fact, I am here exploiting you, and I'm not giving you anything. And I can imagine how angry and enraged you must feel, and for good reason. Tell me more about that. I want to learn from you. I want to hear what you have to say. What you're saying to me is extraordinarily important. And then he just opened up, and he became the most talkative one in the bunch. And again, that's why I like working with teenagers. They're very suggestible. And even, if they've got this hostile streak, most of them have kind of a tender side that can be addressed pretty easily. But the actual methods and stuff, just the process is pretty much the same. And the adult scales that I've developed, the brief mood survey, I've done the statistics on it in terms of validity and reliability, and it works down to about age 13 or 14. And then for littler kids, I have simpler scales, shorter with simpler words in them. But that's about it, what I have to say there.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. And that was a really great illustration, I guess, of how just using the 5 secrets works. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, David. The next question is from Peter. I'll hand you over to Peter.
Yeah, thanks, David. I'd like to, you've stressed several times already today the importance of addressing resistance and that part of the work. And I'd just like to ask a question about that. You've outlined a great structure to address resistance, outcome resistance, particularly is on my mind. And I often find there's a great response to the positive reframing and the pivot question. But I'm concerned sometimes that it's not going to last. It's not going to stay with them, particularly between sessions when you're doing hourly sessions, particularly. So a couple of questions is, have you got any advice for me how I can make it stick with them more? And also, there's another side of that question. How much do you go on and on doing it when they've identified maybe 15 emotions? Would you go through all the emotions?
Oh, yeah.
Or is there a time when you stop?
Well, those are both great questions. First, how you make it stick is when I was in clinical private practice, even before the use of cell phones, I demanded that my patients record every session, or I wouldn't even have the session with them. And I had nice audio and equipment, or if they wanted a video, I had a camcorder, and they would just bring a tape or a videotape or an audio tape, and we'd just put it in and start the session. And then part of their homework is they had to listen to it. And they said they got much more from the sessions, from the recordings than from the sessions. And this was particularly true if it was a great session with externalization of voices and breakthrough, and they suddenly saw the acceptance paradox. But 10 minutes after the session, they probably can't remember what they learned. And then you have to start all over the next week. And so that was the solution to it. And, if you go to a cardiologist, they have all these expensive EKGs and fancy this and fancy that, and they charge huge fees and for small amounts of their time. But we don't have any fancy stuff like that. But we do have a cell phone, which you can record on. And to record the session and insist that they listen it was the solution to that, to making it stick and really learning. Now, you had another excellent question too. What was that? The other one?
It's really part of me wanting to drive it home to really get the juice out of this resistance work. And they may have outlined like 10 or 15 emotions.
Oh, yeah. Well, what I do when I'm doing positive reframing, you can do it with, they may have, on the daily mood log, they're categorized. So you're probably only going to have 9 or 10 or something like that. But even there, it's a lot. And each negative emotion can often give you dividends of 3 or 4 positives. And then you might have 8 negative thoughts that all can be positive reframed. So if you did all of that, you'd have a list of 70 positives or something, or 50 or more, and everyone would be bored out of their gourd and half asleep. And so I kind of come to a point with the patient where I'm seeing they're really brightening up, they're getting it, they're contributing to it. And then I'll often say, now we've only done this with 4 of your negative emotions and 1 of your thoughts, but do you think we've done enough at this point, or are you beginning to see it? And then if they are, then I'll do the pivot question at that point. I don't think it's necessary to get overly meticulous or detailed or do every little thing. I think that therapy is as much of an art as it is a science, and I'm trying to make it as much of a science as I can, but I'm not trying to take away the art, and we all have our own art. And when I work with people, including Marilyn, who had just been diagnosed with terminal lung cancer, and she was feeling about as grim as could be. If you listen to that podcast of that session, about 25% of the time we were giggling. And you'd think that's so disrespectful to be laughing with a patient who just has found out she's on the verge of death. And yet the laughter can be tremendously healing. I don't know how to teach humor, but that's a part of the art for me. And we all have our own selfness that, like Peter, I never met anyone like Peter before. What a beautiful man Peter is, and he conveys a kindness, a humility, a gentleness, a strength, and we all have our own self that we can use also as a part of that therapeutic process. And good therapy, I think, involves an integration of mastering these skills on the one hand, and then being your own spontaneous self on the other hand. And often I violate my own rules. I get carried away. I go in a new direction, and sometimes it bears fruit and leads to an entirely new technique or concept. And sometimes I screw up when I violate my own rules, which I did as recently as Sunday in part of the session. And then I have to back up and correct my error and then carry on from there.
Thank you. Can I just have a quick very brief follow-up on that? You talked about recording just now, and usually you're very clear and say things like, you must record every session. Are we getting close to you saying that really you should be recording sessions?
Well, I think so. Now, if nothing happens in your sessions, like the patient talks and you mutter, "Tell me more," every now and then, the way I was trained to do as a psychiatric resident, I'm not sure that's going to be worth patient listening to. But if you're doing an active form of therapy where breakthroughs are occurring, or even if the patient is resisting you, I think it can be very helpful for them to listen to that, and for you to go back and review that with the patient, and the two of you to get out of that trap. I've sometimes told patients to, when you listen for errors that I've made, so you can not only rate me on empathy, but tell me things that I screwed up on, because then I'm always eager to learn that. And I had a lot of patients tell me that the session was sucked and you were horrible and mean. But the odd thing is, when I listened to the recording, I didn't hear any of that. You were very kind and warm. And so a lot of interesting things can happen when they listen to themselves and they listen to you on the recording. I think if the session has any value and you believe in teaching and learning, I would think that listening to the recording would be an essential part of your treatment.
Thank you so much.
This has been another episode of the Feeling Good podcast. For more information, visit Dr. Burns' website at feelinggood.com, where you will find the show notes under the podcast page. You will also find archives of previous episodes and many resources for therapists and non-therapists. We welcome your comments and questions. If you want to support the show, please share the podcast with people who might benefit from it. You could also go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating. I am your host, Rhonda Borowski, the director of the Feeling Great Therapy Center. We hope you enjoyed this episode. I invite you to join us next time for another episode of the Feeling Good podcast.